Hi everybody, Armoured Pants here, and I have another video for you. This time we are looking at the Tier 7 Czech tank in the new line, the T-34 100, which is a medium tank. And we have just looked at the Skoda T-25 at Tier 6. So now as I welcome you back on channel, we will have a look at the next in the Tech tree. So, as I said, it's Tier 7, it's called T-34 100, it's a medium tank. This is a tank which actually existed on blueprints. So in April 1954, the plan was to use the T-34-85, the Soviet tank, and to develop that for more modern warfare, putting a 100mm gun on a slightly larger, more armoured turret. But obviously, in 1955, they decided not to go ahead with that, with the developments that were happening with tanks like the T-54, T-62, etc., which were coming on, which would make this Second World War technology kind of obsolete. And by the way, that's one of the problems I have with this tank. I'm not really a big fan of this tank, I have to say. I haven't played it yet, quite a bit yesterday and today. I don't mean you can't have a good game in it, but I'm just not a big fan of it, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a second. In terms of the gun, you get 175mm pen with your standard round, 250 with heat, which is your basically your Pramo, and 50mm with HE. So you know the 100mm gun is going to give you some decent pen with the HE. The tank itself, as we look here at Armour Inspector, doesn't really have any armour. So you can see here that the turret, the mantlet, you can't pen the mantle, and the mantle takes up quite a lot of the front of the turret, so that's good. But as it only has 5 degrees of gun depression, you're not really going to get a chance to use that too much, because you can't really go hull down in it. And apart from that, it doesn't really have any armour. Most tanks at Tier 7 and even some Tier 6 and every Tier 8 tank is going to be able to pen it, right? So it has pretty much no armour. So that's something similar to the tank that we looked at yesterday, just go to T-25, right? Now, it also doesn't have a very good power to weight ratio. So while its top speed is okay and its reverse speed is okay, the fact that it doesn't have such a good power to weight ratio is a bit of a problem. So it's not that maneuverable for a medium tank. But then that's following on from the Skoda anyway, which is not so maneuverable because of the poor power to weight ratio and poor reverse. If we look here at the modules, you can see that for some bizarre reason, the fuel tanks are in front of the ammo rack. I mean, who the fuck thought that was a good idea? I mean, that's literally like putting a Christmas tree and petrol factory beside an Institute for Pyromaniacs, isn't it? I mean, it's just not good, is it? You can see here that the modules are quite closely packed together, so the chance of sustaining damage in this tank are quite high. You see here the yellow is the ammo rack, so the ammo racks are prominent in both the turret and the hull of the tank, and the whole part there, they have the fuel tanks in front of them, which is just not a good idea, isn't it? The magenta color we're looking at here is the engine, so the engine can be blown too, particularly when you consider that there's not really any armour covering any of these things. And if you look here on the right hand side, on the front of the tank, that's the other magenta color is the driver. So if you're playing against one of these things and you want to take out a driver, you should aim at that part of the tank. There's little or no armour, so the chance of damaging or injuring the armour are quite the driver are quite good. The commander's position here is just in the top of the tank behind the gun. So again, and because there's little or no turret armour on the side of the tank, it's easy to damage the commander as well. So you're going to be using the medical kit in this tank quite a bit. But you know, the lack of armour is bit of a problem, right? So as we look here at some of the more details, so you've got your AP, heat, and HE is your rounds. By the way, in terms of the provisions, I would run goulash, improved fuel, and fried cheese. And by the way, for those of you familiar with the Czech Republic, this is actually really great provisions to have, right? Because beer goulash in particular is really popular here, one of my favourite meals. And the fried cheese, particularly fried hermelin or fried emmental, which is known colloquially as smajak, but it's actually my son's favourite food, is really typically Czech, and is actually great with a good Czech beer, by the way, for those of you visiting, so I can recommend that. Je to výborně. Now, we're going to have a look at some gameplay here. The tank itself, you can see here as I'm taking off, right? I just want to talk to you about the part weight ratio, right? It's sluggish. Now, when it gets going, like the tank before, it's fast enough, right? But its part weight ratio is poor. And one of the reasons that the Czechoslovaks decided not to proceed with this tank after doing the initial design was that they felt that it was basically Second World War technology and wouldn't serve them well in the 1950s and 60s. So after doing some prototypes, prototype blueprints, they decided not to go ahead with this project. And that's the problem, I think, in Blitz. And this is why I don't like... So basically the T-34 is a tier 5 tank, right? And T-34-85 is a tier 6 tank. But then you start really stretching its technical abilities when you push it into a tier 7, right? And it's the same thing, and it's kind of lazy for more gaming. It's the same thing they do with the Sherman, right? So there's even a Sherman, right? A tier 8, which just doesn't belong there. And you're really trying to fit like a square peg into a round hole. And this tank struggles, I think, a bit at tier 7, and I'm up tiered here in this game as well, right? So which doesn't help at all. So I think it struggles a bit because, you know, okay, look, I know there's other T-34s, like the Rudy at tier 7. But one of the things the Rudy has, which it just doesn't have, is that really awesome rate of fire, right? So the reload in this is 7.8 seconds if you run those provisions and run gun rammer. And 7.8 seconds is quite long reload for a medium tank at any tier, but particularly at tier 7. When you consider that you're going to come up against the Panther, which has a 3-second reload, right? Just over 3-second reload. And the Panther 2, which we just encountered there when we came into this side of the map, which is a 5.5-second reload, and has an 88mm gun, by the way, which is really good. So, you know, its comparative rate of fire is not good. I like medium tanks that are rapid firing, by the way. I think that that's the best combination for a medium tank because it best suits with medium tank gameplay. Now look, there's going to be a very good game here. This is a first class mastery game. I get 5 kills in it. I get around the map quite well. You know, I'm able to take out, you know, I think it's 4 or 5 of the tanks are higher tier than me. So, like, you know, I'm not saying you can't have good games in this tank, absolutely not. But it's definitely not my favourite tank in the tier. I preferred the tank before, and by the way, the tank after I think is much better. Now I need to hightail it out of here. Thankfully the IS-6 has actually just, by the way, if I'd gotten that kill I probably would have gotten a mastery badge here. The IS-6 has just taken out the T-49, so he was on a reload, so I know I've got like, you know, 13 seconds to get out of there, and then I can use the mobility. I mean, look, it's not as mobile as some tanks, but you know, compared to the AT and the IS-6, it's definitely mobile. But a nice shot into him here, and I'm able to get a nice roll because I set him on fire. And now I'm going after him to get the kill on the 5th. So, you know, guys, I think this is not a bad tank, right? You can't point to it and say there's anything really bad about it. I just don't like it that much for the reasons I've explained. It has a poorer power to weight ratio. It has a long reload, which allows you to influence the game less, and also compared to the tanks you're going up against, medium tanks, that puts you at a disadvantage, I think. And it has a complete lack of armor. So unlike the Panther and the Panther 2, which we mentioned, but let's say the Panther, because it's comparable at its tier, it doesn't really have that frontal armor that the Panther has, right? This can be penned all the time, you know? So I mean, it's as easily penned as with a hot knife. So for those reasons, and also the fact that it is this technology which has been forcibly pushed into a tier it doesn't belong. And in reality, in real life, the Czechoslovakian engineers, when they looked at this, decided not to do that. So therefore, I think I can't say power creeped because it hasn't been here before, but it's definitely a kind of punching in a weight it shouldn't. It's in a weight class it shouldn't be, and if I can use that boxing analogy. So I mean, to me, this is the least enjoyable of the tanks that we thus far that I've played, and I've played up to tier 9 now. I would say that you do it, play it, get through it, and get to the tier 8, because the tier 8 tank is significantly better in my humble opinion. So we just have a quick recap. So it has 100mm gun, it has decent pen numbers. They're not great, decent pen numbers, but it has good pen on the HE. So be aware of that for penning light tanks and medium tanks, particularly from the sides and back. It has no armor, which we discussed. Relatively no armor, except on the gun mantle, but you can't really use that because it only has 5 degrees of gun depression. Has poor repair to weight ratio, so it's sluggish taking off. Its traverse speed is better than the previous tank though, which is a plus. But obviously you lose out on the gun depression as well. It has a long reload, 7.8 seconds, almost 8 seconds. So which is not great, and you're not doing massive damage either. I mean, you're rolling 250 to 350 damage, so it's not massive, right? And I think it's just a bit light when both in armor and firepower when you compare it to, let's say, Panther or other tier 7 medium tanks. So overall, not a great tank I don't really like for the reasons I've outlined, but of course you can have good games, and of course you can play it effectively, especially if you're an experienced medium tank player. But I would say, as my friend used to say, if you know what the difference between Brussels sprouts and pubic hair is, or rather what do they have in common, you push them both aside and keep on eating. And I would suggest that that's what we do with this tank. We just keep on eating and get through to tier 8, because the tank there is quite tasty. So guys, I hope you found this useful, I hope you found it enjoyable, and now I guess all that remains for me to say is, as always, cheers much and pants off.